Michael Jackson's autopsy report confirmed. The skin mystery fans questioned for years. For years, the world looked at Michael Jackson and asked the same question. What really happened to his skin? Not his music, not his dance moves, not his moonwalk, not his records. His skin. One of the greatest entertainers in history spent decades being watched, questioned, mocked, defended, misunderstood, and judged over something deeply personal. Cameras zoomed in on his face. Newspapers compared old photos with new ones. Television hosts debated his appearance like it was a public investigation. Fans tried to defend him. Critics accused him. Rumors spread faster than facts. And through it all, Michael kept saying there was a medical reason. He said he had a skin condition. He said the change was not what people thought. But many people did not believe him. Then, after his death, the autopsy report revealed something that changed the conversation forever. The mystery that had followed him for years was no longer only a celebrity rumor. It was written in medical findings. And for millions of fans, that raised a painful question. Did the world spend years attacking Michael Jackson for a condition he had been telling the truth about all along? This is not just a story about skin. This is a story about fame, suspicion, medical truth, public cruelty, and how one of the most famous people on earth became one of the most misunderstood. Because Michael Jackson's appearance was not only a part of his image, it became a global obsession. People did not simply listen to his songs, they studied his face. They did not just watch his performances. They examined his body. They did not just ask what he was creating. They asked what he was hiding. But sometimes the truth is not hidden because someone is lying. Sometimes the truth is hidden because the world refuses to believe it. Michael Jackson was not born into privacy. From the time he was a child, he belonged to the public. He grew up in front of cameras, audiences, managers, reporters, and millions of strangers who felt like they knew him. As a child in the Jackson 5, he was already expected to be perfect. His voice had to be perfect. His smile had to be perfect. His dancing had to be perfect. His interviews had to be perfect. That kind of pressure can shape a person. But Michael's case was different. The public did not just watch him grow up. They watched him change. And when a child star changes into an adult, people always react. But with Michael, the reaction became extreme. His face changed, his style changed, his hair changed, his voice changed, his skin tone changed. And because the world already treated him like a mystery, every change became evidence in someone's theory. By the 1980s, Michael Jackson was no longer just famous. He was the biggest star on the planet. Thriller changed music history. His videos became global events. His dance moves became a language. His glove, jacket, and stage presence became instantly recognizable. He was not just performing pop music, he was creating a new kind of global celebrity. But the higher he rose, the more people examined him. At first, the changes in his appearance were discussed quietly. Then they became headlines. Then they became jokes. Then they became accusations. People asked why his skin was becoming lighter. Some said he was trying to change his race. Some said he was ashamed of being black. Some said it was all cosmetic. Some said it was impossible that a medical condition could explain what they were seeing. And Michael, who had once been celebrated for his talent, now had to defend his body. That is one of the most painful parts of his story. The world wanted him to explain something that should have been private. For many people, skin is identity. It is history. It is family. It is culture. It is how the world sees you before you even speak. So when Michael's skin changed, the public did not treat it like a health issue. They treated it like a statement. They treated it like a betrayal. They treated it like a scandal. But vitiligo is not a scandal. Vitiligo is a skin condition where areas of skin lose pigment. It can appear in patches. It can spread. It can affect the face, hands, arms, body, and other areas. It can be emotionally difficult because it changes how a person looks, and those changes can be visible to everyone. For an ordinary person, that can already be painful. For Michael Jackson, it happened under the brightest spotlight in the world. Imagine having a medical condition that changes your skin while every camera on Earth is waiting to capture the next difference. Imagine trying to cover uneven patches with makeup while millions of people accuse you of hiding something. Imagine seeing your own face become a public debate. And imagine telling the truth, but the world keeps laughing. Michael Jackson addressed the issue publicly in one of the most watched interviews of his life. He said he had a skin disorder that destroyed the pigmentation of his skin. He also said it was something he could not control. For fans, that explanation mattered. But for critics, it was not enough. The rumors continued, the jokes continued, the speculation continued, and over time, Michael's skin became one of the most repeated mysteries in pop culture history. But the truth did not disappear. It stayed with him. It stayed in his medical history. And after his death, it appeared again in the autopsy record. When Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, the world stopped. Fans gathered in shock. News channels interrupted regular programming. Radio stations played his music for hours. People cried in streets, outside hospitals, outside his home, and around the world. The king of pop was gone at only 50 years old. At first, the world focused on how he died. The official autopsy and later legal reporting centered on acute propofol intoxication and the medical circumstances surrounding his final night. That became the headline. That became the court case. That became the story most people remember. But inside the medical examination, there was another detail fans noticed. The report documented areas of skin depigmentation. For people who had defended Michael for years, that detail felt like confirmation. Not because it erased every question about his appearance, not because it explained every surgery, every style change, or every decision, but because it supported the central truth he'd been saying for years. There was a real skin condition. There was medical evidence of depigmentation, and the world had not treated that truth with kindness. This is where the story becomes bigger than Michael Jackson. Because the skin mystery was never only about science, it was about belief. Who gets believed when they explain their own body? Who gets doubted? Who gets mocked? Who gets turned into a joke before the facts are understood? Michael Jackson's skin became a test of public empathy, and many people failed that test. They saw a changing face, and instead of asking what pain might be behind it, they turned the image into entertainment. They saw lighter skin, and instead of understanding a possible medical condition, they built stories around shame, race, identity, and self-hate. They saw makeup, and instead of asking why someone with uneven pigmentation might need it, they assumed deception. That is why the autopsy confirmation mattered so much. It forced people to look back. It forced fans and critics to revisit years of jokes and rumors with a different perspective. And it made one thing clear. Michael Jackson was not simply inventing a story when he spoke about his skin condition. There was medical truth behind the mystery, but the tragedy is that the truth became widely accepted only after he was gone. That happens too often with celebrities. When they are alive, their pain becomes content. After they die, their pain becomes tragedy. When they are alive, people demand proof. After they die, people say they were misunderstood. Michael Jackson lived long enough to be doubted by the world, but he did not live long enough to see the world fully admit how wrong some of that doubt had been. For a DNA-focused channel like Hidden DNA, this story matters because it shows how biology can rewrite a public narrative. This is not about claiming that DNA alone explains Michael Jackson's appearance. It is about the hidden science inside a body the world kept judging. Skin color is not just a surface topic. It is biology, pigment, immune response, genetics, environment, treatment, and identity, all colliding in one visible place. And when a condition like vitiligo appears on someone famous, it does not happen quietly. It becomes part of their public image. Michael Jackson's skin condition existed in a world that was not ready to talk about it with sensitivity. At the time, public understanding of vitiligo was much weaker than it is today. Many people had never heard of it. Others thought it only caused small spots. Some could not imagine how it could affect a performer's appearance so dramatically. And because Michael was already surrounded by rumors, people chose the most sensational explanation instead of the medical one. That is how misinformation spreads. A question becomes a joke becomes a rumor becomes a public belief, and once a public belief becomes strong enough, even the truth struggles to survive. Michael was trapped inside that machine. Every appearance became evidence. If his skin looked lighter, people talked. If his makeup looked heavy, people talked. If a photo showed uneven tone, people talked. If he wore certain clothes, hats, gloves, masks, or sunglasses, people talked. The world kept searching for clues, but many people ignored the clue he had already given them. He had a skin condition. The autopsy report did not answer every emotional question about his life, but it did give medical weight to that statement. And for fans, that changed the meaning of the entire story. Because suddenly, the jokes looked crueler, the accusations looked less certain. The old interviews looked more painful, the photo comparisons looked more invasive. And Michael's voice, explaining himself years earlier, sounded different. It sounded like a man asking to be believed. There is a moment in every celebrity mystery when the audience has to decide whether it wants truth or entertainment. Truth is often complicated. Entertainment is simple. The entertainment version of Michael Jackson's skin story was easy. A superstar changed his appearance and the world turned it into scandal. The truth was harder. A black artist with a real skin disorder lived under global pressure, used makeup and medical treatments to manage his appearance, faced identity-based accusations, and became a target of ridicule for something connected to his health. That truth is not as easy to joke about. That truth requires compassion. And compassion was not always what Michael received. To understand the emotional weight of this, we have to remember what Michael represented. He was not just any celebrity. He was one of the most visible black entertainers in history. He broke racial barriers on television and music channels. He became a global symbol of pop culture. He carried the legacy of Motown, soul, R&B, dance, and black musical genius into every corner of the world. So when people accused him of wanting to erase his identity, the accusation cut deep. It was not just about appearance. It was about race. It was about belonging. It was about how people saw his relationship to the community he came from. Michael denied that he was trying to be someone else. He said he was proud of who he was. But the visual transformation was so dramatic that many people chose not to believe him. That is what made the skin mystery so powerful and so painful. It existed at the intersection of medicine and culture. A medical condition changed his appearance. The culture turned that change into a judgment. And the media amplified the judgment until it became one of the defining narratives of his life. But what if the world had responded differently? What if people had understood vitiligo sooner? What if interviewers had treated it as a health matter instead of a scandal? What if magazines had stopped turning his face into a comparison chart? What if comedians had stopped using his skin as a punchline? What if fans had not needed an autopsy report to prove that he deserved empathy? Those questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. Because Michael Jackson's story is not only about what happened to him, it is about how the public treats anyone who changes in a way they do not understand. People with visible conditions often face staring, questions, comments, assumptions, and cruelty. When the condition is connected to skin, the judgment can be even more intense. Skin is the first thing people see, but it is also one of the things people understand least. Michael's fame made that problem global. His body became a billboard for other people's opinions. And because he was famous, many people forgot that he was still a person. That is one of the most dangerous effects of celebrity. The public begins to believe access is ownership. If a person is famous enough, people think they have the right to discuss every part of them: their face, their weight, their health, their skin, their trauma, their body. But fame does not remove privacy. Fame does not erase pain. And fame does not mean a medical condition becomes public property. Michael Jackson's autopsy report did not just confirm a physical detail. It exposed a moral failure in the way people talked about him. For years, the world demanded proof. Then proof came too late, the man was gone, and the conversation changed only after he could no longer defend himself. That is why this story still matters today. Because now, when people discuss Michael Jackson's skin, they have to include the medical record. They have to include vitiligo. They have to include depigmentation. They have to include the reality that he was not simply making up a condition to avoid criticism. The truth is more complicated than the rumors, but it is also more human, and the human part is what fans still feel. They remember the little boy with the big voice. They remember the young man with explosive talent. They remember the artist who danced like gravity had different rules for him. They remember the music videos that changed entertainment. But they also remember the interviews where he looked tired, the moments where he seemed uncomfortable, the public jokes that followed him everywhere, the way he covered himself, the way he became more hidden even as the world watched him more closely. And they wonder how much of that was caused by being misunderstood. A skin condition does not only change the body, it can change how a person feels in public. It can change how they dress, how they stand, how they handle cameras, how they control lighting, how they use makeup, how they avoid certain situations. For Michael Jackson, image was part of performance. Every glove, jacket, hat, and visual choice mattered. But when a medical condition affects the body of a performer, image becomes protection too. Maybe the makeup was not about deception. Maybe it was about control. Maybe the clothing was not just fashion. Maybe it was armor. Maybe the mystery was not something he created for attention. Maybe it was something the world created because it refused to accept the simplest medical answer. That does not mean every question about Michael's appearance has only one explanation. His life was complex. He made choices. He had surgeries. He lived under pressure. He had health issues. He had emotional wounds. But the skin story, the one people repeated for decades, had a medical foundation. And that is the difference. A rumor says he changed because he hated himself. A medical record says there was depigmentation. A tabloid says he was hiding the truth. But the autopsy details suggest the truth was already there. He had been saying it. People just did not want to hear it. The tragedy of Michael Jackson is that almost every part of his life became a battle over belief. People argued over his childhood, his family, his face, his relationships, his health, his final days, his legacy. But in the case of his skin, the science gave fans something firm to hold onto. It said this was not just a mystery. This was a condition. This was not just gossip. This was medical. This was not only image. This was biology. And for a channel called Hidden DNA, that is the power of the story. The hidden truth was not only in a headline, it was in the body, in the pigment, in the cells, in the medical evidence left behind after the cameras stopped flashing. Michael Jackson's skin mystery became one of the biggest examples of how the public can misunderstand visible illness, and it also became a reminder that science sometimes arrives after the damage is done. By the time the autopsy report became public, years of jokes had already been made. Years of accusations had already been printed. Years of emotional pain had already been lived. The confirmation could correct the record, but it could not erase the past. That is why the story still feels unfinished, because the world got the answer. But Michael never got the apology he deserved from everyone who laughed before knowing. There is another layer to this. Michael Jackson was often described as mysterious, but not every mystery around him was created by him. Sometimes mystery is created when people refuse complexity. They wanted a simple reason for his appearance. They wanted a villain. They wanted a scandal. They wanted something shocking. But medicine is not always shocking. Sometimes it is slow. Sometimes it is painful. Sometimes it is private. Sometimes it changes a person in ways others cannot understand. Vitiligo does not ask permission. It does not care about fame. It does not care about record sales. It does not care if the whole world is watching. And in Michael's case, the whole world was watching. That is what made his condition more than a personal health issue. It became a public event. But it never should have been treated as a public trial. A person should not have to prove their illness to be treated with dignity. Michael Jackson should not have needed an autopsy report for people to believe that his skin condition was real. But that is what happened, and that is why this story is so powerful. It forces the audience to look at itself. Were people searching for truth, or were they enjoying the mystery? Were they asking questions, or were they judging? Were they trying to understand, or were they looking for another reason to laugh? The answer may be different for every viewer, but the lesson is the same. When someone tells you they are dealing with a medical condition, the first response should not be mockery. It should be humanity. Michael Jackson gave the world some of the most unforgettable performances ever recorded. But behind the stage lights, he was also living with a body the public kept questioning. That contrast is heartbreaking. On stage, he seemed untouchable. Off stage, like every part of him was being examined. On stage, he controlled the crowd. Off stage, the crowd controlled the conversation. On stage, he was the king of pop. Off stage, he was a man asking people to understand something he could not fully escape. And now, years later, the autopsy report stands as part of that understanding. It does not tell the whole story of Michael Jackson. No report could do that. It does not explain the full emotional weight of his life. It does not explain what it felt like to look in the mirror while the world debated your face. It does not explain the loneliness of being believed only after death. But it does confirm that the skin mystery was not just a rumor. There was a medical reality behind it. And that reality changes how we should remember him. Not as a man who simply wanted to become someone else, not as a punchline, not as a before and after image used for clicks, but as a person living with a visible condition while trapped inside an impossible level of fame. That is the truth fans have been trying to explain for years. Michael Jackson's skin story was never only about color. It was about pain. It was about public pressure. It was about science. It was about a body changing under a spotlight that never turned off. And it was about a world that often chose suspicion over compassion. So the next time someone asks what really happened to Michael Jackson's skin, the answer should not begin with gossip. It should begin with the medical truth. He had a real skin condition. The autopsy findings supported depigmentation. And the mystery people used against him for years was far more human than the rumors made it seem. Michael Jackson's legacy will always be complicated, but his skin condition should not be treated as a joke anymore. Because behind the mystery was a man. Behind the makeup was a condition. Behind the rumors was evidence. And behind the autopsy report was a truth the world should have accepted while he was still alive. The king of pop spent his life giving people music, movement, and magic. But one of the final lessons left behind by his story is not about performance. It is about empathy. Because sometimes the truth is not hidden because there is no evidence. Sometimes the truth is hidden because people are too busy judging to see it. And in Michael Jackson's case, the truth was there all along. It was in his words, it was in his skin, and finally it was in the report.